welcome to our podium today Anne Murphy Oswald. She's had 27 years of association with Unity. She graduated from their ministerial program and was ordained by Unity Worldwide Ministries in 2004. She served 2 Unity congregations in West Virginia before moving to Baldwin County in 2018. She has family in Fairhope and Daphne and lives in Foley with her dog, Chewy. Welcome, Anne. We're glad to have you today.
Thank you. Got to turn this on, I guess. I'm going to move this chair back a little bit because I like to move around. I don't like to stay behind a podium. So good morning, and thank you so much, Doreen, and thank you everyone for being with us this morning. And let us begin with prayer. And let's just take a deep breath and feel God's presence moving in and through and expressing as each and every one of us. And if it's comfortable for you, close your outer eyes and let's open our inner eyes. And let's just affirm and take these words as your words. I am now in the presence of pure being and immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge thy presence and thy power, O blessed Spirit. In thy divine wisdom, now erase my mortal limitations, and from thy pure substance of love, bring into manifestation my world according to thy perfect law. That is Charles Fillmore's invocation. And let's just rest in the silence for just a few moments, taking in those words. Okay, good morning again. And I like to tell stories, and I don't like to stay behind a podium. I would step down there, but I also need my notes. So, and I heard a story about a Sunday school teacher, and as part of her Sunday school lesson, she likes to do art projects with the children. And so one Sunday, they had been doing a series on Bible characters. And so she decided that she would ask each of the children, they were about 2nd or 3rd grade, to draw a picture of their favorite character in what they had previously studied over the weeks. And so she got out all of her papers and all of the crayons and markers, and the children began. But one little girl, her name was Susie, she came up and said, I need a bigger piece of paper. I need it. So she went and she searched and she got her a bigger piece of paper. And all of the other children were finished with their art projects. But little Susie, she was still working on the paper, and she had the whole entire paper covered. She had clouds in the sky, and she had birds, and she had flowers, and she had fields. And the teacher came over and she says, well, Susie, I don't see any Bible character there. She said, who's your favorite character? Well, of course it's God. And the teacher said to her, well, no one knows what God looks like. And Susie says, well, they will now. And so if she had been in a Unity Sunday school, nobody would have made her wrong, would they? Because we believe there's one power, and we believe in an immanent God indwelling in each of us, and a transcendent God dwelling everywhere. We believe in a big God, and I think that's what really attracted me to Unity. So my talk for today is Unity's 5 principles. And when you think of a principle, what do you think? You think maybe of mathematics or science. It's something that always works all the time. It always works. So as my topic, I said, well, it's 2 + 3 = 5, because the first 2 principles really have to do with just believe what we really know, our knowingness, and the last 3 principles have to do with our putting those principles into practice in our daily life. But they always work all the time. So a little bit of history about Unity's 5 principles. Back in the day of Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, he was asked about what did Unity believe. I guess he was associated with some other Christian denominations, and they kept telling him, well, Unity isn't really Christian. And he set forth 32 principles to prove that Unity was Christian. And so 32 is a little bit too much. He went into a lot of details about what we believe about Jesus and things like that. And so it came to be the 1980s, and Charles Fillmore's granddaughter, Connie Fillmore, was the president of the Unity School, and she was asked to come up with some concise principles about what we believe. And so Connie came up with our 5 principles that we still hold as the truth, the common thread that runs through the principles that we believe can always be true all the time. And she said she was inspired by one of her teachers whose name was Martha Judici. And Martha Judici was able to teach her metaphysics and her Bible interpretation in a concise, direct way. So the principles as we know them today, this is a book about the 5 principles by Alan Davenport, which is a really excellent book. These are the 5 principles. God is all good and active in everything and everywhere. Number 2, I am naturally good because God's divinity is in me and in everyone. I create my experience by what I choose to think and what I feel and believe. Number 4, through affirmative prayer and meditation, I connect with God and bring out the good in my life. So I'm going to go through each of the principles with you and how they have affected me in my life. So the first principle, if we think of it, we think of religion and the concept of God, that there are worldviews about those concepts. And there's many, many worldviews, but there's really 3 prevalent worldviews. And first one would be naturalism, that the people that propose naturalism, they believe that this is all there is, this natural world. So if you were raised atheist, was anybody raised in an atheist home? No? Or agnostic home? No, I wasn't either. Most of us were probably raised in dualism, where we believed that there was one God everywhere present, but there also was a force for evil in the world. So that's the dualism. And that's what's prevalent, I believe, in South Baldwin County, or all of Baldwin County, and most of the Christian denominations, right? But there's also idealism, which is common in the religions of the East, Hinduism and Buddhism, and also A Course in Miracles. Now you might wonder, where does unity fit in? Well, unity is idealism, but it's called immanent idealism. In other words, from out of this idealistic world where all is God and the rest is, the Buddhists would say dukkha, or it's not real, it's illusion, comes the emanation of us with our, flesh and blood existence in our world. Now, how I came to understand this, and that there's only one power and there's one presence, but there appears to be evil in the world. Sometimes there appears to be evil. And so what I was taught at Unity is that we live in 2 worlds simultaneously. We live in the spiritual world of God, where everything is whole and complete, but we live in a relative world. We live in a flesh and blood world where there appears to be evil. The thing about the immanent world, the relative world, is the relative world is not permanent. That it's going to, it's no longer going to be, but the world of God and spirit is going to continue. So our principle number 2, and for number 2, I'd like to tell you a story from my life. Is I was raised Roman Catholic, and I went through Roman Catholic schools most of my life, even 2 years of college. And I got married rather young and had a family. And after that happened in my life, I seemed to really, the rubber hit the road, so to speak, and I was faced with a lot of discord and disharmony in my life. And so I decided to throw away all of my religious beliefs. And I declared that I was an agnostic. Sometimes I used to call myself an atheist. And I got divorced from my first husband, and had a short amount of time where I went back to school and became a nurse. And then I was able to reconcile with my first husband, and I became pregnant with my 4th child. All this time I had withdrawn my children from the CCD, where they studied their Catholic catechism, and I she continued to say I was agnostic. But somehow when I was pregnant with my son, I found myself praying. And I found myself having these religious or spiritual thoughts coming to me. And I just kind of dismissed them and thinking, oh, what's that, bunch of garbage, whatever. But after my son was born and I was in the hospital, I was unexpectedly visited by my former parish priest. His name was Father Gallagher. So he came in and he wasn't looking for me. He was looking for another Mrs. Murphy, who was the sister-in-law for one of the parish priests. And so, but he sat down and we had a really wonderful conversation. And after he left, I had a memory of all the wonderful gifts that I had from my Catholic upbringing. The consideration for others, to give generously, to have some social action in your life. And I remember that I had a belief that I really never gave up, even when I was considered myself an atheist, that within each person was something very good. Now I look back on it now and I think it might have come from the Diary of Anne Frank, because she says something along those lines in her book. But I didn't call it God. But I remember when I was holding my son after Father Gallagher left, I looked down at his face and I knew that goodness was God. And I knew that same goodness was in Father Gallagher. So it was like a breath of fresh air came to me, and I was able to forgive everything about my Catholic upbringing. So I re-enrolled my children in CCD and had my son baptized. And now we go forward 26 years. Not 26, 16 years. 16 years, and my son's about 16 or 17. Can I have the water? I'm getting, yeah. A little bit dry. Thank you. And I'm again having some difficulty in my marriage. And I decide, I'm going to a lot of 12-step meetings for Al-Anon and Codependence Anonymous. So I go to one of these meetings and I'm there. It was at a small church. Didn't look like a church, it was in an office building. So I asked about the church. I said, this is kind of a different place for a church. And they said, well, take this little booklet. It'll tell you something about this church. And the booklet was called The Daily Word. And I stuck it in my purse and didn't really look at it. I was really busy. I worked full time. I had 4 children, a lot of stuff going on in my life. Until about 2 months later, I went to the doctor, and the doctor told me I had cancer. And I came back from having my cancer treatment. I had some time for, recovery, and I cleaned out my purse, and I found the Daily Word. And I looked through the Daily Word, and on one of the pages was a daily word about healing. And the disease that I had, the specific cancer, it had taken one of my very close relatives at a fairly young age, about the same age that I was at this time. And so I believed I had inherited a disease, and it wasn't a good outcome. However, I read in the Daily Word, it said, we inherit disease from our family, but we have another identity. We're a child of God. And it was like I had a whole new, wonderful opportunity to really explore who I had a new identity. That was the only thing I can say. It was more significant than the gift of healing that Unity also gave me, the new identity that I was a child of God. Now I have another story, and perhaps some of you have heard this, and it's from Tuesdays with Maury. And it's a story about a little wave. He's out on the ocean, and he's just bopping along, just enjoying the beauty of the day, the sun, and the smell of the salty air. But he begins to realize that all of the waves in front of him are crashing onto the shore. And so he cries out to one of the bigger waves and says, look, look, we're crashing, we're crashing. And one of the bigger waves says, don't worry, little fella. You're not just a little wave. You're part of the ocean. And so that's what we are. We're each a wave in the ocean of God. Now, to go back to my story, when my idea of having that little spark of God in us when I had my son Danny. But my concept was able to expand when I came into Unity and began studying the principles, realizing that each of us are the same substance of God. Now, Eric Butterworth, teacher that he actually made his transition while I was down at ministerial school. He says, we are in God not as a raisin is in a bun, but as a wave is in the ocean. So my early concept was that we had God in us like a raisin in a bun, but it grew that we are in God as a wave is in the ocean. So we're ready for principle 3. I create through my thoughts, emotions, and beliefs, the power of our thoughts to co-create with God. Now, I was able to learn through Unity, visualization and prayer, so that when I was experiencing chemotherapy, my white blood count would go down, and I would be able to visualize it and bring it up. So I learned a lot of important, really valuable concepts through Unity. But I have a story to tell about the power of our thoughts. And there was a ways back, there was a man who was in charge of cleaning the railroad cars. And he went one day into one of the freezer cars, and he went in there to clean it, and he was cleaning it, and then he realized that he had inadvertently locked himself into the car. And so the next morning they found him. He was dead, and he had written on the wall of the car, "Cold, colder, I'm freezing to death." Now the interesting thing is, there was no electricity to the car, so there was no freezing. It was all the power of his mind. So in Unity, we express this in many different ways. We say thoughts held in mind, return after their kind. We say what we focus on, we empower. And we say the law of mind action. And principle number 4. Of course, I drop it. Yeah. Principle number 4, we connect to God through affirmative prayer and meditation. So what I learned in Unity is prayer is not about changing God, it's about changing us. And it's experiencing God in the silence. It's affirming and remembering who and what we are. We are a wave in the ocean of God. The other analogy I really like to use is the acorn. We are the acorn of God, that the acorn has the potential to be a massive oak tree. And we have the potential with us to be the same as Jesus, to evolve and grow, to express the full Christ consciousness. So in prayer, we discover direction and insight. And this was another wonderful gift to me. That in 2001, I was working as a nurse on a unit in a hospital near my home, and it was a wonderful unit. All of us got along well together. It was very unusual, that we all got along together and everything ran smoothly. Well, one morning in early 2001, they called the bigwigs from the hospital called us into one of our meeting rooms, and they announced to us that our unit would be closing, that the Medicare financing wasn't financing this type of delivery system any longer, and they needed to close the unit. And they told us that we needed to seek employment in other areas. They told us within the hospital we would be given priorities, et cetera, et cetera. So I took this into my heart. Meanwhile, I had been studying Unity for, probably about 10 years at that time, taking classes, they used to have where they would bring the teachers from the village out to the different communities, and they would offer 1-week classes. My friend Barb and I used to take them together. We used to drive to Unionville Park and take the classes. So I'd accumulated quite a bit of credit classes. And my goal was to be a licensed Unity teacher. But the back of my mind, I always wanted to be a minister. When I'd look up and see somebody speaking, I thought, oh, wouldn't that be wonderful if I could do that? I was so transformed by these teachings, But I had this little voice in my head, who do you think you are? You know, do you ever get that? And who, you know, why do you think you can do this? So I put it into prayer, and I truly believed that I would receive the answer. And it was only 1 or 2 days later, and I had 3 answers. The first answer came, I used to go to a book study group, and we used to study spiritual books. And the leader, after one of the meetings, the leader of the book study group came up to me and she said, Anne, have you ever considered being a minister? So that was my first affirmation. And then my second affirmation, as as the unit was closing down, we would be getting less and less patients they wouldn't admit to our unit. So we would have more time to visit with each other, with the other nurses. So we were talking about how we would have a reunion of our staff, our friends and staff. So one of my friends said, well, we'll probably be so-and-so's wedding that we'll get together. Maybe they'll be getting married. Now, then she said, Anne won't be getting married, but she'll probably be performing the ceremony. So that was the second affirmation. So the third one was I had to go and tell my minister that I was planning to apply for ministerial school. And I actually attended 2 churches. One was a very small church similar to this, and another was a larger church in Oak Park. And so my minister in Oak Park was my mentor, and who's the one I needed to get permission from. And so I went to her and I said, Halise, I plan to apply for ministerial school and I need a letter of approval from you. She says, Anne, I was wondering when you were going to come and tell me that. So if we put the questions out, we will receive the answer, sometimes from very unexpected places. So principle 5, living the truth I know, we make a difference. And for this one, I have a Bible verse that I really love, and it's from 2 Corinthians 2. And it says, you yourselves are our letter, written on our hearts, known and read by everyone. You show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts. So we bring ourselves out into our world just as Jesus did. And that is the way we live the truth we know. That's what I believe. Now, how do we really know how to do this? Well, one thing that I like, anybody familiar with Rachel Naomi Raymond, the writer? You should, Donna, she's wonderful, isn't she? She's a physician and a therapist, I believe, and she was raised Jewish, and she talks about in the Kabbalistic, the mystical realm of the Jewish religion, there's something called Tikkun Olam, and it's that it's up to us to bring our light into the area of the world where there's darkness. That we're here to repair the world. Not the world really needs to be repaired, but to break away the darkness where there appears to be darkness. Now, many of us have been raised to believe that we need to have an MBA or a MD or a PhD or whatever. We need to have a lot of initials. Well, I don't believe that. I believe that we need to be MBUs, mobile blessing units in our world. We need to bring our light into the darkness. And so you may ask, what is mine to do? Well, I really don't know, but you know for yourselves. When you watch the 10 o'clock news, where do you see pain and suffering? Where do you see where your light needs to be? I'll tell you about myself, because that's what I promised I would do today. So for me, living the truth I know is to have a prayer and meditation practice. That's really, really important. And that's where I get the direction of where I need to go and what I need to do. And truly listen, and the answers will come. The answers will come. And I need to, there's a saying that I don't really know where it came from. But it says, what we see is missing from our world and our lives is what we need to give. That's a powerful thing. So when I look out in the world and I see suffering or the need for compassion, that's where I go. So I need to bring lightness into the perceived darkness. So an important place for me to bring my light was to interfaith and ecumenical movements, the clergy groups. And also because I used to see a lot of divisiveness within the Christian community. Like, there's 33,000 Christian denominations worldwide. And our name is unity. So I always saw it as not to make others wrong, but to bring my light of understanding. And I was so multiply blessed by being present with these, especially in West Virginia, mostly men, who were my clergy friends. But they became my clergy friends. And we were able to work together. It was also through these groups that I was able to see where the need in the community was, where people were hurting. So first place I got involved was with children. I felt that there was a real need for children to be mentored. And there was a program called PASS. And I volunteered there with little boys in first or second grade. And I would just go once a week, one-on-one, maybe do a few lessons with them, talk to them, establish a friendship that wasn't from their family and wasn't from their school. And that was absolutely wonderfully rewarding for me. The other thing my husband and I did is we volunteered at the feeding program. We would go in and prepare the food and hand it out to the people in the community who were nutritionally deficient. And there we also were so multiply blessed by the appreciation that they gave back to us. The love and the appreciation was so much more than what we gave, the smiles and the thanks that we received from them. I also volunteered for the Homeless Coalition, made food and brought it to the homeless and stayed overnight. There always were at least 3 other people there that were, so you always were very safe. I also was a volunteer chaplain at the hospital. I had had a nursing career my whole life, so I felt that I was very comfortable in the hospital setting to offer prayer to people. Sometimes they would turn me down, often they would turn me down. And also did a service once a month for the nursing home participants who were in the hospital. They had a nursing home wing. And I think that we can do just small things. One thing that I think that's really important is to smile when we go to the grocery store at the clerks and thank them and call them by name. When people are bussing at the restaurant, smile and thank them, try to call them by name. Jesus said the least of my brethren, but I don't believe that no one is the least of my brethren. No one is the least of our brethren. So everyone deserves a smile. Smile at the homeless. People are hesitant to make eye contact with the homeless, but that's our brother. He's a wave in the ocean of God, the same as we are. He's a wave in the ocean of God. So I think that Mother Teresa said, we don't need to do great things, but we need to do small things with great love. And let us go into meditation. And I'm going to sit. And I invite you to just take a deep breath. And as our signal of going inward, let's just gently close our eyes if it's comfortable for you. And we're going to do a series of 3 breaths. And on the first breath, let's just affirm, I release. And on the second breath, let's affirm, I am present. And on the third breath, I am open. And let's just continue that little pattern for maybe 2 more cycles. I release. I am present. I am open. And just allow your body to be supported by the chair. And with our physical eyes closed, let's open our spiritual eyes. And we see on the horizon in front of us a soft white light. And in our mind's eye, we move towards that light. It's soothing and comforting to us, bathing our entire physical presence. And as we allow the light to move in and through us, we realize that there is no separation between us and that light. That we are one with Spirit, wrapped in an embrace by the loving presence of our Mother, Father, God. It may feel as if the chair is not supporting you, but you are completely supported by Spirit, home in Spirit with God. And you remember a time when you were pure Spirit, made a promise to come to this little blue planet to bring God's love. And we can ask ourselves, what is mine to do? How am I to serve? I've come to this human experience not just for myself, but for others. And I stand ready to share God's love with everyone. This love expresses through me and as me. I am ready. I ask for my perfect place of service. I live the truth, knowing that God is all, that I am God, that we are co-creators, and that I am never separate from divine radiance. I let my light shine to illuminate those in the darkness. I let my heart expand for those who need love. I give as it has been given to me, and I am grateful. And let us rest in the silence. remember that in each moment we can make the decision to love. And as we follow our 5 principles, our life can be a prayer. And our time for meditation will be coming to a close, and I invite you to do anything you need to do to bring your awareness back to our unity service.